Okay, everyone, welcome. Really excited to see everyone here today. And my name is Kate Bruner. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm the Youth and Family Services Principal Consultant at the Colorado State Library. And today I'll be moderating the presentation. So I will turn this over in just a second to our presenters to introduce themselves, collect up your questions during the session that you have for Catherine and Erica, and then we will have a Q&A session at the end. This is part of our Talking Teen Services series, in which we discuss all kinds of different topics related to working with teens and tweens and providing teen services in the library. So this series and all of our Colorado State Library Youth Services offerings are created by the librarians from the Youth and Family Services team at the Colorado State Library. And our staff positions and operating expenses are grant funded by the Federal Institute of Museum and Library Services. And that's what allows us to provide these sessions to you all at no cost. At the end of the session, I am going to ask you if you will please fill out a survey. I'm going to go ahead and drop the link in the chat if you'd just like to open it in a tab and come back to it later. And when you fill that out, you'll just put my name in as the presenter, Kate Bruner, and then Understanding Teens 3, because this is the third session of the Understanding Teen series. And you put that in as the presentation title. I'll share that again at the end of the session, but if you just want to have it handy now, you're welcome to. And then also, if you happen to be watching the recording of this, you are also welcome to fill out that survey as well. So, okay. Thanks for listening to all the tidbits and the admin and logistics. And I'm going to turn this over to our presenters today to introduce themselves. And I'm thrilled to have the Teen Services team from Arapahoe Libraries here today for part 3 of their Understanding Teen series.
All right, we will get started. Good morning, everyone. We're excited to be with you for this last session of our 3-part series that we've had the privilege of doing. We'll introduce ourselves today for those who are just joining us for this session. My name is Catherine. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm the Teen Services Supervisor for Arapahoe Libraries. I've worked for the district for about 14 and a half years and was the one of the teen services librarians until a few years ago. So I've had the privilege of working on this team for a really long time. I will say Anusha's out sick today. She sends her best to all of you, but she has 0 voice, so she's really not able to contribute, is missing being able to be here for this final session, but Erica and I will try to carry on. So I'll let Erica introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Erica, also she, her pronouns. I'm a teen services librarian with Arapahoe Libraries. I've been in this job for somewhere between 3.5 to 4 years. Prior to this, I have worked in public libraries. I've worked in a school library. I've worked in an academic library. I've kind of bounced around a bunch, and I have some experience in education as well.
Okay, so if you've been with us for the other 2 sessions, this will look familiar, but we like to start with an invitation. And so today we invite you to stay curious about the content we're presenting, to be open, so letting the perspectives of your colleagues in and sharing your individual experiences and truths. I will say that this is, we hope, one of the more interactive sessions. The last 2 sessions were very content heavy. We had a lot of information that we wanted to convey. And this one is a lot more of talking about our experiences and that how do we build positive relationships with youth. We acknowledge that you all have a lot of insight to share on that as well. So be open to sharing what has worked, what doesn't, what you find useful, and considering the intent and impact of the information that we are sharing and that you are sharing, and recognizing that it is different. Before we get into some of the activities and content, I also just wanted to do a quick shout out to a local organization here to Denver. I'll put their information in the chat, actually. They are the Flourish Lab. They're a Denver-based organization that focuses on training adults who work with youth in out-of-school time, specifically in supporting emotional intelligence and social emotional development. And a huge focus of their work is relationship building. Eric and I were actually trained to be trainers for them earlier this year. And so a lot of the content that we are sharing today is a mix of our own and things that we are certified to teach from the Flourish Lab. So I just wanted to take a moment to give them the credit that is due. You will see many of their activities and their logo popping up on the screen. And that is because a lot of their work aligns with our philosophy and approach to building relationships with youth. I will say that for them and for us, one of the biggest questions that we get is, how do I build relationships with teens? But really, actually, more often, how do I manage behavioral problems with teens? I think is one of the most frequent questions. And so today, as part of our invitation, we invite you to challenge that notion of approaching behavioral problems, and we'll talk about that and reframe it a little bit. And we have been working on this year really actively trying to reframe that ourselves into creating positive relationships and positive behavior expectations rather than trying to mitigate negative behavioral issues. So with that in mind, we will move into our first activity. And this is something that we did with the Flourish Lab. I think it's really important as youth services staff. I would invite you to consider this if you would like to put it in the chat. Please share in chat. But I think it's really important for us to recenter ourselves and why we are doing this work. If you are someone who has chosen to work with youth, you probably have a very specific why too. I'll share with you mine in a moment. If you haven't, your why for being in public libraries or in library services in general probably has some things that would line up with this. And so again, I want to just kind of start in this section by acknowledging that there's a lot of expertise in this Zoom room today, and there are a lot of people who have, because I know some of you have vast experience working with youth, and everyone has valuable perspectives to bring. So thinking about what is your why for doing this work, whether you've worked with youth for a long time, or if this is your first role working with youth, or like I said, if you actually don't have a specific charge in your role to work with youth, there still are patrons in the library. So why do we work with them? Why do we serve them? It's important to stay in touch with our why as we do this work. And so, yes, I would invite you to reflect on what your why is. And if you feel comfortable sharing that in the chat, we would love to see that. Probably won't have time to read them all out, but certainly will go back. Like I said, I love to go back and read all of the chat later. So for me, my why really does center around being able to be what we'll talk about today, like the supportive adult for them. Erica's gonna laugh at me and I can only see her face. I'm a crier whether I want to be or not. And ironically, my mom's maiden name is Crier, so I came by it honestly, actually. So it's a thing. But I just do. And what we learned in the Flourish Lab is it's okay to cry. It's not something to be shameful about. But every time I talk about my why, I do get a little choked up because I want to be the validating adult for kids. And so often I think they don't have that, or they are asked to be quiet, that they're too much, they're too loud, they have too many feelings, they're overwhelming. And so my why really is to be one of the grown-ups who accepts them for whatever they bring to the table. So that's something that I try to center, especially if I'm feeling stretched thin or short or tired, because yes, all humans, I think, as an introvert, I will say all humans to me sometimes become too much. But for me, when I'm working with youth, I really try to just pull myself back to that. I can be a person who is supportive of them. They may not have that. I may be the only one who has done that for them today. So something that I really try to keep in mind. Erica, did you want to share your why? We didn't prep that, but
I can. It's pretty similar to Catherine's. I say often, actually, Catherine says this as well. I hesitate to use the word safe place or safe space or safe person because I don't get to dictate what safety feels like. And so And that's like the last several years I've come to that thought, that belief. And so what I switched to saying is, I want to be a welcoming space for the teens that I get to work with, wherever I am. That's not something that I always had when I was a teen. And so that really informs how I respond now and how I approach my work now. I am not usually a crier, and I also get choked up when I think about stuff like that. I kind of blame Catherine. I think she's rubbing off on me, but that's okay.
All right, so now we're going to go into another activity where we'll ask you to participate as you feel comfortable.
So when we're thinking about building relationships and those positive behavior expectations, one of the things that we want you all to think about, you can reflect on this individually. If you're comfortable, please feel free sharing in chat. But we'd like for you to think of an adult from your life when you were a teen who had a positive impact on your life. And I challenge you to think of someone who wasn't a parent or a caregiver. Not that those adults don't have a hugely important role in our lives, but sometimes we need those wider support systems. So think about, how did they impact you? What did they do? For me, this was a teacher, actually came to mind very readily, who I had in 8th grade, who I never saw again after 8th grade, and yet whose approach to her work really impacted my entire view when I later went on to teach, and now as a teen librarian. And the thing that she did was she listened. There is an experience that I had a lot as a teen, and that I know a lot of the teens that I work with have, where when you start to voice an opinion, it gets shut down. Sometimes it's shut down by, you're really young, you're too young to know, wait till you're older, you'll understand. That's an incredibly frustrating thing to be told. And she didn't do that. It was a very hard time in my life, or it was the start of a very hard time in my life. And she gave space when I was answering a question. This was an English class. When I was answering a question, she gave space for me to formulate my thoughts and articulate. And it wasn't just me. I noticed that she did it with everyone else. And that was hugely impactful, because sometimes you feel rushed to come up with what you're saying. And that's a very hard moment to have. And so that was really, really meaningful for me, to feel like I was being heard and being seen. I'm seeing that we've got a lot of teachers that have had impacts on our lives, which I think just speaks to some of the incredible work that teachers are doing, and some of those similar experiences in the chat. Thank you all so much for sharing those. On the flip side, by all means, keep sharing. But on the flip side, we also can have adults in our lives who have negative impacts. And so same question, thinking of an adult who was not a parent or a caregiver, who had a negative impact on your life when you were a teen. How did they impact you? What did they do? For me, again, actually, it was a teacher, which shows some of the power. And I don't, honestly, in hindsight, as an adult, I don't think that this teacher meant to come across the way that they did. But it was a math teacher, and math is not my strong suit. I've always been English, literature, artsy. Not that I can't do math, just it takes me a little bit extra time. And this teacher just said, "You're just not good at math." And that was a moment. I was actually reminded of that moment recently in a fantastic book that I'm going to recommend to all of you real quick. Truth Is by Hannah V. Sawyer. You should all go out and read this if you haven't read it yet. But there's a similar moment in there with an adult in her life that reminded me of this. You're just not good at such and such. And even if it's not one of my skills, there's a different way to say that. And so trying to keep that in mind. How do we say things to teens? Those negative moments hit hard and they stick with you, clearly, because I'm still thinking of this decades later. So when we're having those interactions, think about how is this hitting? And as we are kind of recentering on our why, at the end of the day, the young people we work with, they are the central point of that work that we're choosing to do, or sometimes not choosing to do and just find ourselves doing. And so a way to think about this and recenter that why that I think is particularly powerful. And I'd love to have you all, or we'd love to have you all think about this and share in chat. Try for quick, like 1 or 2 word answers. But if the teens in your library are sitting in a workshop similar to this 20 years from now, what do you hope they say about you? What would be your ideal? Because that helps you bring that why into focus, right? I hope, for me, I hope they say that I was kind. I hope they say that I wanted to hear them, things like that. And I'm seeing a lot of those in the chat as well. And I really appreciate that value, that respect, that accepting. I think we all feel this way, right? And the teens in our lives are really no exception. So keeping in mind, what are positive adults? Positive adults are adults who care, who genuinely want things to be okay for you, right? Who are present. This is very much that hearing, listening, accepting, who see potential, right? Not, you're just not good at math, but all right, this is something we're going to work on a little bit more. Who don't give up, who find strengths, right? Instead of looking for your weaknesses, what are those strengths? What are those things you're really good at? Who challenge youth, right? Not in a challenging, intimidating kind of way, but in a, hey, let's rise to the occasion kind of way. Who notice changes? This is incredibly powerful, right? When you notice a change, and not just a physical change, right? Not just, oh, it looks like you got a haircut. When you notice any kind of change, that's really powerful. Who take responsibility. I did something wrong. I'm going to apologize, right? I'm going to tell you, hey, I am so sorry. I was at fault here, and I'm going to apologize to you because you are a human who deserve that. And who are consistent, right? And this doesn't mean, I love this one. And actually, I have a really great story to share about this one that just happened last week that I've been riding the high off this story for over a week now. Consistent means that when you show up, right? Not that you're there every single week. You might not even be there every single month, but that when you are there and they know what to expect from you. And my story is that there is a school that we do a lot of outreach. We're really fortunate that we get to do a lot of outreach. And there is a school that I've been going to since I started in this position. I see these students once a quarter. And it is one of my favorite school visits to do. And they've started to get to know me. Some of them think they know me very well. It's very funny. And one of them who I met last year in middle school, who has a tendency has very big feelings and doesn't have a problem with sharing those big feelings. He is delightful. He really is. He can get a little loud. He can get a little overwhelming. Wonderful kid. Every single time we go, he has made something for his girlfriend. And last week, when I went to this school, he comes in with a girl and they go and they sit down, and I overhear him say and nudge her and say, "You're finally going to get to meet her." And he brought his girlfriend up to introduce her to me. And it was one of the best moments of my year, like absolute hands down guaranteed. And it's because somehow I have been consistent. Every time I've gone, there's a consistent aspect about my visit that makes him feel good. And so those are the kinds of moments that really, talk about recentering your why, friends. Like, absolutely.
Okay, so we are going to shift into talking about some of the what that shift in mindset looks like for us. And I just want to like start this section. So for the rest of our time with you, we are going to share some practical, hopefully actionable things that are things that you can start to try to put into practice. But I want to acknowledge that there's not one right way to do this. There's not one quick magical answer for how to do this work of building relationships with youth and shifting our mindset from controlling negative behavior to inspiring positive behavior. There's not one right way to do it. And I think, like I said earlier, that's one of the most frequent requests we get from other staff at our library, from people when we're going out to do workshops. It is one of the most frequent requests. Like, how do we handle this? How do we approach it? And I don't have a quick and easy answer for you. It takes time. It takes consistency, as Erica mentioned. And for us as adults, I think it takes us shifting our approach and our mindset to working to build positive relationships, inspire positive behavior. I'll just share, I actually just finished the Youth Mental Health First Aid training yesterday that we've shouted out this. I was doing my kind of recertification every 3 years, and I was reminded that the statistic that they share in that training for helping youth who are experiencing mental health crises is that the number one predictor of whether or not they will be able to make it through various mental health crises is a supportive, caring adult in their life. So with that in mind, just keep in mind that that's what we want to center in the work that we're doing. And so we're going to talk about how we do that shift, how we shift from what the Flourish Lab calls from power to partnership, how we move from being completely centered on controlling what we see as the negative behaviors, which I will admit sometimes we are doing because of like fear or anxiety of other patrons' reactions in the library, to working with the youth to inspire positive behavior. So if you've been with us for all of the webinars, we've talked about a lot of things that are impacting the lives of teens. And we also want to just emphasize that like all of those things, there's a lot of them that are like heavy. There's a lot of them that feel scary, and the things that feel out of our control to be able to, if you're like me, if you're a fixer, you want to fix things, like it's out of our control to fix. I'll just acknowledge that like all of those things also don't equal a free pass, and sometimes challenging behaviors do arise. And we can experiencing all kinds of challenges working with youth, but also just in our work with the public, compassion fatigue, feeling stretched thin, and having really limited capacity, the amount of emotional labor that we are asked to do every day as public servants. And so just want to take a moment to acknowledge that. And our recommendations of shifting that mindset is not any sort of commentary on what we as like probably collectively a library organization may have been doing in not the best way forever, but just an opportunity to learn and work on that lifelong learning, which is one of the pillars of libraries, and that opportunity for continuous improvement. So our goal, as we said, and this is something, like I said, that we've been working on at our library system in changing the language that we use and the way that we approach any interaction that we have with youth. We're trying to have this inform the work that we're doing going forward. So looking past that negative behavior to the positive behavior. And so there's a huge list here of what that shift can look like. And I know that for many of us, our instinct and sometimes the comfortable place is on the power side, because it does give us a little bit of control over situations. And moving to that partnership side can feel scary. It can feel like giving up some of that control, and there's a lot of unpredictability, but I think it's still really important. So Eric and I are going to kind of bounce back and forth and take a moment, or like just pick a couple that we want to highlight on this section that really stood out to us as ones that we feel strongly about. And Eric, I'll let you go first.
Sure. I think one of them that I had said really stuck out to me was the respect means do what I say versus respect means I value you. I think one of the things that the Flourish Lab founder said that really stuck with me is to think about, because you hear this a lot, right? They're not respecting me. They're not showing me respect. And then the question is, what does respect look like for you, right? What does respect mean? And that hit me really hard because I'd never really thought about it before, right? Like, oh, well, respect for me never really meant the do what I say, but I do understand where that thought is coming from. And so instead of thinking they are only showing me respect if they do everything I say right when I say it, respect means I value you. Maybe they don't do exactly what I say right when I say it. Maybe they question me, but that questioning doesn't necessarily mean they're, what's the phrase, sassing me, right? Or disrespecting me. They might just need a conversation about that. Or maybe they see something in what I'm telling them to do that doesn't actually work best. And so, me then taking a moment to say, to have a conversation about it instead of just being like, you go do this right now, that invites that partnership, that invites they are a co-planner, a co-person in this moment with me. And that can be really valuable.
I will just emphasize, I think I've said this a couple times, one of the ones that really stands out to me is the relying on a quick fix versus requiring effort and intentionality. There is no magical fairy dust that you can sprinkle for long-term positive results. It is something that takes effort, it takes intentionality, it takes time. It is not something that's going to happen overnight. You will have I have had so many days where I've come home and just felt utterly defeated of like, I am getting nowhere in this relationship building thing. Like nothing is working here. And that is okay. Ultimately, like that long term, yes, it's a little bit at a time that we are building these things. And it does take time. It takes a lot of effort. So I try to remember that when I'm feeling frustrated.
It does. It takes a very long time. And it can sneak up on you where you're like, oh, okay, we're there. It's a wonderful feeling. Another one of these that I think is really important, they're all important, but another one that really spoke to me is the anticipates challenges versus anticipates greatness. How many of us have been trained in, whether it's in a professional role or life itself, that it is good planning to think about what could go wrong and plan for those challenges, plan for those challenging moments. And instead, maybe we shift and instead of anticipating that the youth we're working with are going to provide challenges or are going to push back, set up roadblocks, whatever the case may be, what's going to go right? What's going to go great? There was, when I was teaching, I remember reading an article that phrased it as, we live up to the expectations that are set for us. And so if we're expecting challenges, that's what we're going to see. That's what we're going to get. But if we anticipate greatness and we anticipate great things, yeah, some things might go wrong. But we're looking at that greatness. And that doesn't mean, that's not like please don't take a toxic positivity lens. But plan for those great moments. And then as those challenges come, you'll be more prepared to anticipate them. Counterintuitive though that may seem to a lot of us.
I think that also speaks to a question that we got in the last webinar about like, should you bring up if you have to ask a kid to leave for the day? And like, do you mention that at all the next time? And I actually, in the interim, listened to this podcast from Peter Mutabazi, who is a foster dad. If you are not familiar with him, he came to the United States as kind of a kid who lived on the streets in Uganda for most of his youth, and he was educated in the United States after he was taken in, and he talked about he now fosters kids, and he's adopted 6 of them, but he has fostered over 47 children and teens, and he talked about that actually. And so I did add to the handout that you all have access to on the Libraries Learn website that podcast, and he talks about the fact that we don't want to bring up those past things. Again, as Erica mentioned, because it sets this expectation of failure almost, or that you're watching or you're tensed and anticipating it. And so we should anticipate good things only, even if we've had a history of not so good things from some kids in the past. And then the last one that we'll just mention, because I have had conversations with people that have very different interpretations, is the adult voice versus youth voice. And I think that can look very different depending on who you are, and what the context is. Sometimes adult voice means, as Erica mentioned earlier, that do what I say sort of thing. So prioritizing my voice and the things that I want. But sometimes it also means like the adult patrons in our library. And our role as youth services people is to give voice to the youth, either actually literally physically give them a voice in the spaces, or to advocate for them when they are not there. And so whenever possible, being able to incorporate youth voice, whether it is in the design of the spaces, if you can do that, whether it is in creating whatever sort of rules or best practices around how to use the space, in the programs that you provide and the services that you offer, being able to give weight to the things that they are expressing that they need, and having it actually, at least whenever possible, and I know it's not possible 100% of the time, but whenever possible, have it carry more weight in things that are for them, than the adult voices in the room. It's that idea that I think was coined in disability rights organizations around nothing about us without us, nothing for us without us, giving that space for them to give input and have their voice heard in these interactions as well is really important. So we opted not to show the video, but there's a video that will also be linked in your handout. And this is really the most important quote from it. The video is from a talk that Josh Shipp, who is a kind of a speaker who does TED Talks and other things, talks about his time in foster care, and that opportunity to, he really was written off by everyone. I will give some content warnings if you choose to go and watch that video that's linked in the handout, that he does talk about abuse and suicide attempts and substance abuse and all kinds of other things. So just be aware of that. But really the main takeaway for him was that he finally had one foster dad who was this caring adult for him, who became the caring adult after, I think, like 18 different foster homes, where he had been passed from one to the next. And for him, it was when this dad said to him this, so that we don't see you as a problem, we see you as an opportunity. And if we can frame the work that we're doing with youth in that way, I think it, for me at least, it's a complete shift in perspective, even with the somewhat squirrely kids that I find more challenging than others. So just a thing that I try to center in the work that I'm doing.
So these are just some of the keys to positive interactions that we've picked up from some various sources. One of the resources that I believe that we've shared with you is a blog from a school librarian called Don't You Shush Me, which is absolutely fantastic. Highly recommend that. And so some of the things that are shown on this slide come from that blog, and from other sources as well, that talk about teens and what they kind of need in those relationships that are most supportive and most helpful. It's really important to remember that respect is not automatic. Teens in particular feel the need for respect to be earned, understandably, right? I don't know about all of you, but I think of adults as needing respect to be earned as well. And so it shouldn't be any different with teens. They're sensitive to social feedback and standing, and while they're sensitive to that, they're figuring out who they are and where they belong. It's a really, on the one hand, it's an anxiety-inducing time. I very clearly remember my teen years, and I wouldn't go back to that moment, those moments of trying to figure out who I was and where I fit and who I wanted to be. But it's also a really cool time. Like they're figuring out who they are and who they want to be. That's awesome. But while they're going through that, the adults in their life, they need respect from us, and they need us to understand that we need to earn their respect, not just assume it because we're older or assume that we should have it because they're older. They want to be seen as valuable and competent and important, just like anyone does. And that's such an important factor in how they may be communicating with you, your relationship. Hugely important. It's not about control. Again, it's about community. It goes back to that adult voice versus youth voice, right? Community is when you are together working on a problem, not saying, this is what I'm telling you to do, so go do it. Working together in those things. It's important to remember that power struggles are not productive at all. Again, we're looking for that community, right? A power struggle is just going to lead to a shutdown, understandably. It's also important to think about that our teens, their lives are so highly regulated, right? They're spending however many hours in school. Then they also have homework. Many of them are doing extracurricular activities, which could include sports, but also other clubs. Any free time that they have, it's likely to be regulated by a caregiver or some other outside factor. Their lives are very highly dictated by outside people and outside factors. And we have the opportunity to not be one of those people. And to give them kind of that free space and free time to explore and to just breathe and just be, to just exist in our spaces and with us. And that's really important, right? Because when you think about it, they are, while they are so highly controlled, their time is so highly controlled, they're also expected to, they're on the cusp of adulthood and they're expected to know what that means. My son just turned 18 in August and is like, whoa, I'm an adult now. I don't think I know what it means to adult. And I'm like, buddy, I'm 42 and I don't know that I've figured out what it means to be an adult. So be aware of, am I expecting this teen to know how to adult or how to be older when maybe they don't? And they don't have to. They don't need more control. They just need that respect. They need to be heard, they need to be seen, and they need to be valued. And that's what they need from our library spaces. So some of the ways we can do that, fewer rules are better, right? And when you do have those rules, if you can co-create those rules, that just increases buy-in, but it also prioritizes their voice. Again, back to that adult voice versus youth voice, right? Rules, some rules have to be in place, right? Absolutely. We're not saying throw all of the rules out the window. Otherwise, there's a very good chance you're going to end up with people standing on your tables. But the fewer rules you can have, the better. It allows for success, right? It goes to, again, the anticipating greatness rather than anticipating challenges. When correction is needed, one-on-one correction is really impactful, right? It eliminates an aspect of shaming or spotlighting that can happen if it's within the whole group. Not that if something happens and there's a whole group that you can't be like, hold on for a second, but when you can pull them aside and have one-on-one interaction, really, really impactful. Also, keep in mind that humor can be a really great tool to use. Even if, like me, your jokes are often really bad jokes. I mean, I'm okay if they're laughing at me, as long as there's a way to create that connection. Always keep in mind whether this is something that is actually destructive or if it's just personally annoying. Noises are one of the things I have to check in with myself about often. Keep those in mind. Don't hold grudges, goes back to the don't bring back behaviors that may have happened before. That allows for building that positive relationship as well. And finally, train all staff. It's important that even staff who aren't specifically teen or youth dedicated feel that they have been trained with some tools and resources to be able to interact with the teens and kids who are coming into our libraries. The more positive adults teens and kids can have in their lives, the better. And we get there with more training.
A few more things, and again, we won't talk about all of these in detail. And Erica kind of already mentioned a few of these, and some of them kind of feel like they go without saying, but I know that like the theory versus actually in reality, like get to know a teen. What does that look like in practice when they don't want to talk to you and sometimes won't even acknowledge that you're talking to them? So yeah, sometimes it's easier said than done. To your point about having to have some rules in place, or people end up on meeting room tables. I have a story, and this isn't a side, but recently we had some very enterprising teens who were, it turns out we learned after the fact, trying to film a video for one of them who was running for student body president. But what we encountered when we peeked into the meeting room was two teens who were saran wrapped to the meeting room tables. They were on top of the meeting room tables. They had been saran wrapped, and one of them had what we hoped and only assumed was a toy knife. And without context, that is just like a situation that you're like, what in the world is happening? And so we did go in, and we had some like not the most positive assumptions type of conversation with them. And we learned that they were trying to recreate a scene from the serial killer TV show Dexter as part of their campaign for student body president. And we were like, I love your vision. I love where you're going with this. You still cannot saran wrap your friends to the meeting room tables. Let's talk about some alternatives. So yes, it is, you do have to enforce rules. Sometimes though, pausing before you just immediately you're out today, and getting like, what's the context of what's happening here? These are like the most studious kids. They made a poorly informed decision to cling wrap someone to a table in a public space. So just kind of, helping them also think through their prefrontal cortex abilities. Anyway, so owning your stuff, knowing that, and I think we talked about this in a previous thing of like recognizing what is my trigger and like the thing that I know is going to set me off always, and that I'm always going to have a bias against, and owning that, and doing the work as the grown up in that situation to be responsible for that, and to take charge when needed. And then knowing when to back off. I think going along with getting to know the teens, that's a really important thing. You cannot force them to develop a relationship with you. Sometimes all that they will ever be willing to do is to like sometimes acknowledge that you're there. And I have still seen those instances when it's the kid, when you go and you need to talk to them about something, that it's like they won't talk to you. Other times they really do want to interact with you, and they're bantering and they want to tell you about their day. So it's also kind of being able to read them as people, and giving them the respect that we would give other adults as well, of like, hey, I probably just need to back off and let you be here today. I will say that like my goal is not to be best friends with every teen that I work with. That's not realistic. I also recognize that would be weird and creepy of me. And so figuring out what is an appropriate relationship with this youth, noticing them, acknowledging that they're there in a positive way and not only in negative ways, so that I positive interactions with them before, if any sort of corrective conversation might need to happen, is something that I tried to work on as well. But also knowing, like I said, I'm not going to be best friends with really any of these kids, or most of these kids. And some of them don't want to get to know me at all, and that's okay as well. And I can still have positive relationships with them even so. So continuing on for the sake of time, we are going to talk a little bit about the Bank of Trust, which I feel like is a thing that comes up every now and then. So you may have heard of it, this idea that in building trust with someone, As the Flourish Lab says, trust is built or broken in moments, but there's this idea of you have to do things to put coins into the bank of trust. And then there are also things that we do that take coins out of the bank of trust. And that for every good thing that you do, every positive interaction that you have, it's like 1 coin in, but every negative thing that you do is like 3 coins out. So it is a lot more work to build trust than it is to break trust. And so keeping that in mind as we are building these relationships with youth, because if you think about it in the context of what would you do for someone that you trust? And when they talk about this in the Flourish Lab, they talk about the fact that for many people, like for someone that you trust, within limits, you would say, I would do almost anything for them, within reason. But for someone that you don't trust, almost nothing. And so when we are asking to have this kind of social agreement with youth of like, here's how we would like you to show up in our space and interact, if we have no trust with them, if they don't trust us at all, then what motivation do they have to do that? So those moments of connection, that consistency and dignity and respect, those are the things that build trust the most with youth. So just something to keep in mind as we are doing that work with them. I'm going to actually skip the next activity for the sake of time. We were going to have you brainstorm, but I would just invite you to think about some of the things that would add to the trust with teens in our library and things that might take away trust from them, things that we would do as adults. Because when we need to repair trust, that is, I mean, we just also need to acknowledge that sometimes we do need to repair trust. And as Erica mentioned earlier, owning that, being consistent and kind of naming when we mess up is huge for that repairing of trust, and can sometimes also go a long way to building more trust and respect in the future. When we can model and own our stuff and be accountable to the youth, like, hey, this was not the best interaction. I was not at my best. I'm going to actually share a story that I think they would be okay with me sharing. One of our teen librarians shared an experience recently. They were working on the floor. Lots of kids were chatting, and this one like couple of kids in particular were like wrestling with one another in the way that kids do, it seems like, when they greet one another. And our librarian was like, okay, you're out for the day. And like, I identified one of these kids. And after that kid left, his friend came up to our librarian and was like, hey, I just need you to know that they were actually innocent in this case. I was the one who like tackled them, and they were just sort of trying to fend me off. They didn't really do anything. And so at that point, they had an opportunity to go to this kid who was still waiting outside for their ride and own that. Like, hey, sorry, I made a mistake. I'm going to invite you back in for today. And I will try to get more context in the future. And it was a really great opportunity to build that respect with this kid, to own that mistake, and show that we are human too, and prove that we care about them. So yeah, just things to keep in mind as we are working with youth, and that every interaction that we have, we're either building or we're taking away trust with them.
So for the sake of time, I'm going to go through this pretty quickly. We did talk about this in the last session, but we wanted to chat about it here as well, because it's important to remember that while we're doing all this positive relationship building, just like in the story that Catherine shared, sometimes it can be really important to own our stuff and to recognize our own things. And a good way to do that, or a helpful way to do that, is to take a purposeful pause. So there's some research that has shown that you have about 6 seconds after we call it an emotional hot button. So one of those like triggers, those knee-jerk reactions, you have about 6 seconds before it can become emotional flooding or kind of an overwhelm. And so taking just 6 seconds to pause can often help you see the board a little bit more clearly. What is happening and how should I be responding in this situation, or how should I proceed? 6 seconds both feels like a lot and not a lot, but it really does help when we hit some of those challenging situations. It helps us to then put into practice those behaviors to build those positive relationships. Be both a lot and not a lot.
It's a lot when you're waiting for someone to answer a question that you made. It feels like an eternity sometimes. Okay, so this is a time we are getting to sort of our Q&A portion, but also when we are teaching this training with our staff at our libraries, we crowdsource from them, like, what are some of the challenging scenarios? What are the situations that you find difficult to deal with? And so this is sort of a crowdsource list from them. And we kind of brainstorm and talk through what would our approach be. And again, with the emphasis on there's no one right way to approach any of these situations. But just the approach of trying to work towards building trust, keeping in mind positive expectations and behavioral, like all of those things. And how might we reframe some of those interactions? What might we do differently that we haven't done in the past? So for the sake of time, again, we won't go through all of these scenarios, but just something to think about. Do you have strategies that you would use? Because I mean, we have done this now with many different outside organizations, with every single individual branch team in our library, and consistently large loud groups of teens is one of the things people are most uncomfortable with. Really okay with them working with them one-on-one, but when it's a large group of them, suddenly I don't know what to do. So what do you do in those situations? How do you set boundaries with teens? We have some of our kids too who are at the library every day. The library is their place where they are, and they love to talk to the staff members. They know every staff member's name. And how do you set a boundary with them of, I am so happy to interact with you, and also I have to work with other patrons as well. What does that boundary setting look like in a productive way? Messes left behind. Yes, absolutely. It's a really challenging thing to kind of have that conversation about, like, were you even aware that there are trash cans in our library? No? Okay. Something like that. So yeah, all of these things are things to keep in mind, but for the sake of time, since we only have a few minutes left, we will go to our question portion. And I think, Kate, if there are any questions, you've been gathering those. So.
Yeah, we just had one main question come in, and that was someone who asked about if you don't have teens coming into your library, what steps can you take to bring them in?
So very ironically, not really, but funnily enough, Kate and Erica and I were just actually chatting about this very type of question when we were waiting for this to get started. And I think all of us would have a fairly similar answer of like, it's a noble goal to want the teens to come into the library, but I guess my question back would be, where are they in your community? And is it feasible for you to go to them? Knowing that many of the barriers that they face are unreliable transportation, not completely owning their time, or obligations that require them to work or be caregivers for either adults in their lives or youth in their lives. Recognizing and acknowledging that being able to come to the library is not always a realistic thing. Are there ways that we, as the library, can make sure that they still have access to those services and initiatives wherever they are in the community, whether that's in their school or in their workplaces or other places that they gather in the community? And so I'm biased because I have spent a lot of my career doing outreach, but my answer to that is figuring out where they are outside of the library. And I recognize that there are limitations with small staff, and if you don't have the time to be able to do that, but like working on identifying where they are and how might you reach them there.
Yeah, it was funny that we just had this conversation right before. Yeah, I think finding out a lot of information, as much information as you can about, like Catherine said, where they are. There is some statistical information you can look at. Like, for example, you could look at employment rates for teens in your community. And we are just starting to gather data in Colorado. The Department of Public Health is just starting to gather data on caregiving teens as well. So that is something we're starting to see emerging data around. And it looks like the rates of kids caring for adults as well as caring for siblings is pretty high and climbing potentially. So just something to think about when you're thinking about like, why aren't you seeing teens in the library? It may very well be that it's not feasible, or it's going to take completely different thinking for how to serve those teens in your community because of the real world situations that they're dealing with in their lives. So we did have one more question come in. So, and I do think we have time for it. So Angie asked, if you have time remaining and can talk a bit about good approaches for setting boundaries with teens, that would be most helpful.
I just had to do this week.
I was gonna say, I'm gonna let Erica talk about this one.
I just had to do this week. A former teen intern who is also a teen volunteer and attends teen programs, and oh my goodness, she's wonderful and fantastic. She actually has my cell phone number because I worked with her during her internship. And she sometimes texts me questions that come at about 8:30 at night. Often. Understandably, that's the time that she has. And so I really just asked her. I was pretty upfront. I mean, I was gentle, but I was pretty upfront. And I said, I love that you feel you can reach out to me. I love that you feel like you feel comfortable asking me these questions. Oftentimes, if you text, I'm not going to hear it, or I'm not going to be able to respond outside of my working hours because I am trying to set those boundaries for myself. So when you have those questions, if you don't mind emailing them to me, then I know that I'm going to get that question, and I'm less likely to either not respond or forget to respond, or whatever the case may be. I also told her that she would be helping me in setting my own boundaries if she helped me with that. And she's totally cool with it, which was great. But I have used that strategy before when it's being completely honest and saying also, like, you're helping me by these things, or by doing these things. With the teen that actually Catherine was kind of mentioning earlier, there are many of them, but the one that Catherine, I'm pretty sure I know which one, who is wonderful. It is kind of a repeated, anytime that they see me in the library, they're very excited to see me and they want to tell me everything. And sometimes I'm on my way out or I'm heading somewhere. And so I'll give them kind of a timeline. So I'm like, I really want to hear from you. I want to hear how things are going. I have about 3 minutes before I have to go that way. So you can walk with me and tell me, like, if you can walk with me and talk with me, great. Otherwise, I've got about 3 minutes. Tell me what you can, and then I'll see you later. And they respond really well to that. It is something that you have to do every single time, more often than not. And so it can require some of that patience, and it definitely requires, like, being aware of your tone, and how you're saying it, so that it's not you're not accidentally sounding negative, but are, like, reiterating, I really do want to hear from you, and I really do enjoy chatting with you. I just don't have the time. And if you're on the floor, hey, I really want to hear what you're telling me. I also need you to understand that if somebody comes up with an issue that I have to help with, I'm going to have to step away again. I'll be back, but I'm going to have to step away. So really, absolutely, just clearly, explicitly articulating what are those boundaries and what are those guidelines that you have can be really helpful. And sometimes if they ask you a question that you're like, if it's that kind of boundary, just saying, that's not necessarily something I feel comfortable chatting about. They respect that too, usually.
Yeah, I love all those ideas. Thank you so much for sharing those. And I just want to say thank you to Catherine and Erica for also, and the whole ALD team for everything you guys have offered this month in these 3 workshops. So the first 2 are recorded and are on librarieslearn.org. This one will be also. Please be a little bit patient with us. The folks who usually take care of that upload are out of the office right now. So and I'm about to travel for a workshop, so we will get there. I just put the feedback survey link in the chat, so if y'all would be willing to take some time to do that, that would be amazing. We utilize those surveys a couple different ways. We do collect data that we provide to our funder, but then we also utilize them, to me, most importantly, to read through your feedback. We read every single one to take a look at what we could do better, different approaches we could take, or different topics that you all are interested in us providing a Talking Teen Services session about in the future. So if you have some time to fill that out, we would really appreciate that. So I also thank all of you for coming today, and I hope you got one thing at least that you can go put into action this afternoon or tomorrow, something you can do right away, because adult learning theory tells us if we can apply our learning as quickly as possible, we are more likely to retain it. So again, thank you everyone for coming, and take care of yourselves, and we will hopefully see you at a future Talking Teen Services session.
I'll just mention, because there were a couple of questions we didn't get to, I did put our email addresses in the chat. So if you would like to send us those questions, we will be happy to send you some of our suggestions for any of the questions that we were not able to get to today.
See how amazing they are? So, thank you for that. All right, everyone, have a great afternoon. Thank you. Bye.